Welcome to Beer Untapped with Perry Miller, the podcast. I'm joined by Seth.
Hey, welcome, guys. Thanks for finding us on the internet.
Now, these shows originally aired on Brookings Radio, but now they're all here for your enjoyment. I hope you like it.
There you go. Sit back, enjoy the show, relax. Let us know if you want to see anything on future shows. As we said, this comes out live in the Brookings area, but enjoy this archive episode.
Beer Untapped with Perry Miller. Welcome to Beer Untapped with Perry Miller. It may be the first modern beer. It was the first style to be produced on a mass scale and the first ready to be consumed as soon as it left the brewery. The Porter this week on Beer Untapped.
There's probably no more true of a British and even a London-based beer than the Porter itself. Porter grew up kind of intertwined with the stout. Actually, at one point in time, the stout was called a stout porter. Later, the porter was dropped and actually just became a stout. So Guinness Extra Stout was originally called Extra Superior Porter and only really became known as a stout after the 1840s.
That's Seth Cook from Wooden Legs Brewing in Brookings. Porter is mentioned in British publications as early as 1722. Exact origins disputed, but there's a colorful possibility.
Before it was even known as a porter, it was originally called Three Threads. Now, the Three Threads is basically you'd go into a bar or you go into a pub and you would have the barkeep pull from three different tanks. You'd pull from an old ale, you pulled from a two-penny, which is the strongest beer, you'd pull from just a new beer, and you could kind of blend these together at the back or behind the bar. The cask sitting behind the bar with the oaken knobs on it, and the frothy tankard. This is the old world style. It was reportedly very popular with the porters of London, the luggagemen. Even so, that the breweries started picking up on the style and started developing beer specifically to meet those flavor profiles.
Others claim it was just a natural development from the brown ales of the day. The Porter was the first beer that left the brewery ready to be consumed that very day.
Previous to the Porter, the brewers would brew green beer or young beer, and the age was gained either by the pub operator or the dealer. So they would sell a beer as young as it could, and then they would sell it to their dealer or sell it to the pubs directly, and the pubs would cellar it, and it would become aged. Whereas the Porter, as it came to be called, the day it left the brewery, it was aged.
And the Porter was the first mass-produced style of beer.
It fell hand in hand with what was now known as the Industrial Revolution, the ability to mechanize and the ability to not just the brewing process, but the elements that went into the brewing. Be able to grab the grains more easily, being able to just manufacture vats more easily, being able to have the ability to trade your wares into the countryside more easily. This all kind of came about at the same time that the Porter became popular.
And it wasn't just popular, it was hugely popular.
A lot of these companies became incredibly wealthy and incredibly successful. They actually entered what ended up being considered a beer arms race, where they would make bigger and bigger and bigger vats just to feed the population.
The huge popularity of the Porter led to a tragedy in London. That and more when Beer Untapped continues.
So pull me a pint, John. I'm not going home yet. In fact, I might stay here for years.
Welcome back to Beer Untapped with Perry Miller as we explore the Porter, probably the world's first truly modern beer. The Porter became far and away the most popular drink in early 19th century England. As breweries raced to produce more, they built larger and larger aging tanks to hold all this porter. Seth Cook from Wooden Legs Brewing in Brookings.
One of the vats now famously ruptured. It was a porter vat. It created the London beer flood of 1814 or something, some fateful October day in 1814. When it ended up rupturing, it blew over buildings. I think over 300,000 gallons of beer gushed into the streets, destroyed some homes, knocked down a wall of a pub, trapping employees, everything else. People actually died in the wake of it.
At least 8 people died from drowning or injuries sustained in that flood of porter. Now, porter has no rival until the British Pale Ale became popular in the 1820s. The Pale Lager later took over the world, including England, and the porter nearly vanished. But that changed with the advent of craft beers. American brewers have revisited the style. Most at some point turned their talents to a porter, whether traditional or modernized.
It's a great base beer. You can do a coffee porter. You know, I've seen a mint porter. I've seen an habanero porter.
Coconut.
A coconut porter. Yeah, coconut porter. You know, just by the guys over at Crow Peak. It seemed to lend itself really well. The cool thing about porter and browns is that's usually one of the first styles you try to make when you homebrew too. You can kind of throw anything at a porter and make it pretty good.
Wooden Legs now has on tap their first traditional English porter, the Pierce Street Porter.
And we had, talking to our vendors for yeast and other things, they had an English-style ale yeast that it was different than our house yeast. So we said, let's take a stab at this and let's make this. We also intended to keep our porter actually on the lower ABV side. We decided we wanted a beer that you could have two responsibly within the same period. So we kept the ABV low on this one. We tried to make sure that the character of the yeast was still present, but really use some of the malts that we've fallen in love with, some Victory malts, some of our English pale malt. Maris Otter is what we use, Maris Otter pale ale
Very
malt.
traditional British
Very traditional.
malt.
And then we use some traditional kind of earthy British hops.
And the result, the Pierce Street Porter. The name comes from an early map of Brookings that identified the current 5th Street by that name, Pierce Street. Porter is one of the styles that's well represented in South Dakota. We get some of the world's best, and beer guide Drew Eklund at the Brookings Liquor Store says they've got them.
There's many different kinds of porters that range from sweet to bitter and light to heavy. Like Sam Smith's Tatty Porter is on the lighter, sweeter side, while something like Founder's Porter is more robust and bitter. There's a ton of porters in the store now.
Ton of great ones. Black Butte, Cutthroat, Founders, Samuel Smith.
Zipline, Oatmeal Porter.
Wonderful porter.
Relative newcomer to our porter selection is from Kona, Pipeline Porter. Very solid.
That's it for Beer Untapped with Perry Miller. Until next time, drink local and drink responsibly. Thank you for listening to this archived edition of Beer Untapped with Perry Miller. Feel free to listen to other episodes, and if there's anything you'd like us to talk about on a future show, please let us know. Thanks again.